Today is March 22nd, 2023, and this week there were 72 reported cases of COVID-19 in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, which shows a 47% decrease over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, each subject is comfortable not to wear a mask. We are here today with Hullen, and we're going to hear a little bit about his experience during COVID. So, how long have you been in the Charlotte area?
I moved to Charlotte back in 1989. So I've been here since then. I was born and raised in Salisbury, North Carolina. So that's where my parents live at now.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about what the start of the pandemic was like for you.
Well, I'm a small business owner. Been doing business here for the city of Charlotte, in the city of Charlotte, since about 2007. And so it impacted our business very severely. Mm-hmm. It started with the impact on my business when COVID hit, but it impacted me personally.
Yes.
Because unfortunately I contracted COVID.
Oh no. At what point in the pandemic was that?
It was probably about 2 or 3 months into the pandemic.
Okay, so pretty early on.
So pretty early on. But what was interesting, I actually had taken a cruise prior to COVID hitting the United States. And this is the second time I've taken a cruise. So prior to the COVID hitting the United States, I won't name the ship. It was a very nice ship. Mm-hmm. And so I went upstairs to go get some breakfast. Now, I'm a clean person. I always wash my hands. And I went to walk in, and there was a lady there, attendant, standing there. She goes, "You need to stop." And I saw a line forming. And I'm like, well, that's kind of odd. I said, well, what's going on? She goes, well, we got a washing station set up. So mm-hmm. before you go in to eat or go to the buffet bar, you must wash your hands. Right. And I said, I don't have a problem washing my hands. I said, but I've never heard that before.
Right. That was new.
And she goes, don't worry, you'll see, washy. Now, I'm not thinking anything about it. Mm-hmm. And then when the COVID hit the United States, and I believe I contracted it when I was out of town because I was doing volunteer work when census. Okay. So I actually had to go to Kentucky. And I thought I just had the flu as a hotel room. Mm-hmm. And I thought I just had caught the flu or something. Right. So I said, well, let me get myself back home because I didn't want to get treated, in Kentucky. I want to get back here to my primary care physician. And I actually drove to Kentucky. And literally within 24 hours of me getting back here into Charlotte, I about passed out. Oh. I actually had to call the ambulance to come to my house, and they took me to the hospital. And by the time I got to the hospital, I almost coded out. Mm-hmm. And I had to go into ICU. I was in the ICU for 7 days. Oh, wow. I was on a ventilator. Oh, and when I finally come through, that's when they told me I had COVID. Mm-hmm. And so that was pretty scary because the floor I was on, when I finally was able to recover, two of the nurses, they rolled me out of the hospital. And the floor I was on, I couldn't understand why all the curtains were closed. Mm-hmm. And the nurses started clapping when they would roll me out off the floor. And I go, "What are y'all clapping for?" I turned around and said, "What are you clapping for?" And they looked at me dead in the eye and said, "A lot of people don't even make it off this floor." Wow. So that was pretty scary. Yeah. And so when I got outside and I saw the sun, I was just so thankful.
Right.
So once, the United States decided and figured out, a vaccine for the COVID, I took the first shot of Pfizer. I took the second shot.
Yeah.
I took the third shot, and they come out with another shot. So I got all 4 vaccines.
Yeah.
Last year, I guess because sometimes they call long-termers from the effects of COVID. And I've always been a healthy guy, never had any health issues. I went back into ICU for another 7 days. Oh, wow. And come to find out I had esophageal bleed. And I was bleeding pretty bad internally. Didn't even know it, didn't even realize it. And so I was in the ICU for 7 days. So that kind of knocked me back for a loop. And again, that impacted my business. All right. Obviously, because I couldn't run it. Mm-hmm. And then lo and behold, last year in September, I got sick again, but they couldn't attribute it to COVID.
Okay.
So, like I said, I just think I'm, a long termer. I've talked to some people who have had issues since they contracted COVID
Right.
and never had issues before. Anything from congenital heart disease. I've had several people that I've known that have died.
Yes.
So it's a pretty serious thing, and I would not wish that on my worst enemy.
Yeah.
So, but today I'm healthy, and I'm just glad to be alive. And my biggest worry and concern was, like I said, my daughter, she graduates from UNCG in May. So I said, I got to make sure I'm there for her.
Right.
So that's my experience with COVID.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about what the initial lockdown experience was like for you when they first started announcing that?
I got stir crazy because I'm a type of person, I own my own business. So I'm used to being on the go all the time.
Right.
And just being stuck in a house. I don't do a whole lot of TV watching. So I just had to find other ways to keep my mind going and keep myself busy, whether it was doing work around the house or work outside.
Right.
So, but as soon as, the restrictions got lifted, I'm ready to go. Yeah.
Ready to get out of there. Great. And then has the pandemic changed your normal routine in any way today? To the same?
It has. I get sometimes kind of nervous because, some people still wear masks. And then when I see people coughing, it kind of concerns me because you don't know. I have allergies.
Right.
So, you have to kind of put things in perspective and trust that people know that they know if they got it, they're not going to be walking around because all it's going to do is just shut everything back down again. But one thing I do is when I'm out, say like traveling, if I go to the airport or sometimes I go see my parents in Salisbury and I take Amtrak, I definitely wear a mask.
Yeah.
Because you're in more of a confined space. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I do the same thing. So, and then did COVID impact your friendships or family relationships in any way? Did it bring you closer to people? Did it cause conflict?
It caused conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, caused conflict. Some relationships I had to have at a distance. Some people, felt differently about it.
Right.
Some, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Like I said, I went through it, so I know what it does to you.
Right.
And trying to convince other people who thought it didn't exist or it was something else, that created some friction.
Yes.
But, at that point, you can't change a person's mind. And like I said, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy and I wouldn't wish it on my best friend.
Yeah.
So.
And then was there a time that you stepped in to help someone affected by COVID?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So one of the challenging things that I didn't even realize is when COVID hit, they wouldn't let too many people come in the hospital to see you. Even your own close relatives, they wouldn't let you come up. And I kept fighting the nurses every day. Like, what if I'm in here by myself and I die and my relatives won't even know it until after the fact. So when I was in the hospital, it was almost like the nurses and the doctors became my family members because they were caring for me. So the only contact that I had with my family members was by phone.
Right.
So that was tough. That was tough mentally. It was tough emotionally for me. So
yeah, it's hard to be without that.
That's yes. Yeah, interaction. Yeah.
Right. And then tell me a little bit more about your business and how that was impacted.
So my business, we do commercial flooring installation.
Okay.
So obviously, and most of my work was done through the city of Charlotte as a contractor. And quite a bit of our work was done out of the airport. Okay. So when COVID hit, well, guess what shut down? Or shut down, rather. Well, the airport couldn't do any work out there. Then there were other businesses within the city of Charlotte that we did work for. That got shut down.
Right.
So once that happened, that was a severe economic impact, not on me personally, but for my employees that work for me.
Yeah.
So, and that was a struggle because, they relied on me for income.
And that's, I feel like every industry basically was impacted.
Yes.
So everyone had to kind of figure out what they were going to do.
Yes.
And then how do you think that the COVID pandemic shaped you as a person? Did it change your perspective on anything or make you live your life differently?
It made me live my life differently, especially when it comes to my health. Because like I said, I've always been a healthy individual. And these last 3 times that I've been in ICU, it's just changed. Not that I ate bad prior, but now I'm more careful about what I eat. And what I take into my body. Between the time that COVID hit and to date, I've lost probably about 30 pounds. Oh, wow. Yeah. So, that takes a toll on your body too. When I first got COVID and I got out the hospital, I couldn't even lift up a pen. Yeah. Now I'm a business owner, so I'm used to lifting a lot of heavy stuff. So that was even a shocker. That's a shock to my body, to my mentality. And, am I going to get through this? Am I going to overcome this? So.
And you feel back to normal?
I feel about 90, 95%.
Okay.
But there are some times where, if I start sneezing, I get,
Get a little worried.
I get a little worried. But like I said, I have allergies, and I know right now with the weather changing, everything and pollen and all that stuff. So I just keep a check on my health. Yeah. I make sure to get to my primary care physician. One thing I do now that I've never done before is I always keep in my bedroom, I keep a thermometer and a blood pressure cuff.
There you go. That's a good idea.
So.
You're ready. And then what do you think the future will look like? How do you think it's impacted like the country? What do you think?
I'm not real sure. I just hope we don't, we go back to that point. Because it would be scary. Now they're talking about this new SARS or whatever it is that's going around. So who knows with that? And another thing that kind of upset me was my sister. She had got sick about a month ago. And I understand protocol. I know that the hospital are trying to protect everybody. So my father called me. Again, they live in Salisbury. And he couldn't get up here because he's a disabled vet. So he's like, hey, look, he says, can you get up there and go check on your sister, see what's going on? She said she was throwing up all night long and spitting up blood. So I put my clothes on. I made a beeline to the hospital, get to the hospital, and I get to the emergency room, and they got 2 armed guards there. Oh, wow. And I'm like, I'm here to see my sister. They said she just got checked in, and they told me point blank, you can't come in and see her unless she's admitted to a room. I said, well, can I come and sit in the waiting area? Yeah. And they go, no, you have 2 options. You can go stand outside, or you can go sit in your car until we call you. Wow. And I got pretty upset about that. Yeah. And I got very adamant about it to the point I think they thought I was going to try to do something. And I said, you know what? I said, it's not even worth my stress. Just call me when whatever y'all figure out. So fortunately, it was just kidney stones. Okay. So I could relate to that because I've had kidney stones. Okay. And those are no fun to pass.
That's right. Yeah. And then are there any other like stories or things that you can remember from your time during the pandemic? It could be the beginning or the middle or any part of it.
Just feeling a little anxious. And then, basically having to trying to find a way because like I said, my business was impacted. So now, I'm shut down. Now you got to go back and try to rebuild those business relationships. Okay. And then during that time, what happened? A lot of people, they decided they're not going back into an office space. Right. All right. They're not going back into a building. A lot of companies went to working remotely. Right. All right. So then you got new employees who don't know you. Right. And so now you're trying to, establish, new relationships. So that was difficult because the old relationships, hey, come on out here. We got to get this work done. Right. There's no question. Yeah. No hesitancy. Yeah. So.
I'm sure hard to like train new employees.
Yes,
remotely,
yes,
things like that.
yes.
Okay, great. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
No, I just appreciate this opportunity to, to share it. Hopefully, it will help someone else. Um, like I said, a lot of people now are working remotely. And I'm a people person, and I like that human interaction.
Yeah.
So for me, unless the government or somebody tell me, hey, or somebody offer me, some huge saying sum to work from home, I'm out and about.
Yeah.
I'm out and about. So
you're ready to be in person.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for the experience and the opportunity.